This is the 3 Arts Workshop Week 5, and this week in grammar, we're learning how to diagram compound sentences. First, some definitions. We need to distinguish clauses from phrases. A clause is a distinct part of a sentence, one containing a subject and predicate. A phrase, on the other hand, is just a syntactical unit or grouping of words. So some examples. Phrase. Here's a prepositional phrase. In the road. No subject, no predicate. Here's a clause. In the road, a squirrel paused. There we have both a subject and a verb. We have a clause. There are two main types of clauses, independent and dependent. An independent clause contains a subject and a verb and forms a complete thought. A dependent clause contains a subject and a verb, but it does not form a complete thought. Some examples. I walk my dog. I, subject, walk, verb, and the total unit is a complete thought. Here's dependent. When I walk my dog. When I add that word when to the beginning, I still have a subject and verb, but now I've added something that makes the thought incomplete. It's hinging on some other information that we don't have available. There are three types of dependent clauses. It's really good to go over some definitions, and later in another screencast we'll learn the process of diagramming. Three types of dependent clauses. Noun clause, adjective clause, and adverb clause. A noun clause functions as a noun in the sentence. An adjective clause modifies a noun in the sentence, like any adjective. And an adverb clause modifies a verb in the sentence, just like any adverb. Let's go over some examples. Noun clause. He believes that I stole his lunch. That I stole his lunch has a subject and a verb, I stole. Yet it's incomplete. That I stole his lunch couldn't stand on its own. And the whole thing is acting as a noun. What is it doing in the sentence? It's the direct object. What is it that he believes? He believes that I stole his lunch. It's the direct object. It's a noun clause. Example of an adjective clause. The person who told you that lied. Who told you that? Subject there is that relative pronoun who, and the verb is told, but obviously who told you that couldn't stand on its own, right? Not in the indicative form. So what is this clause doing in the sentence? We can see that it's modifying the word person. Which person? The person who told you that. That's which person. This clause is modifying a noun, and so it's an adjective clause. Example of an adverb clause. I never use a napkin when I eat. When I eat can't stand on its own, but it has a subject and a verb, I, and eat. And what's it doing? It's answering a question, an adverb question. When? When is it that I never use my napkin? When I eat. So these are helpful to know. What kinds of dependent clauses exist? Noun clause, adjective clause, adverb clause. Now let's take a step back and look at different kinds of sentences. Our lesson for today is learning how to diagram compound sentences. Let's explain what that means and what other kind of sentence structures exist. Simple sentences have one independent clause. Complex sentences have one independent clause plus one or more dependent clauses. Compound sentences have two independent clauses, and compound complex sentences have two independents plus one or more dependent. Today, we're learning how to diagram the compound sentence, which has two independent clauses, and next time, we'll put some of that information about dependent clauses into practice, learning how to diagram complex sentences and compound complex sentences. Show you some examples of the simple sentence. The trees are green. one independent clause, subject, verb, can stand on its own. Complex sentence. When summer comes, the trees are green. Adding that dependent clause to the independent clause makes this a complex sentence. The trees are green and the sun shines. Both of those clauses can stand on their own, so that's a compound sentence. Two independent clauses joined by a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Here's a compound complex. When summer comes, the trees are green and the sun shines. Two independents plus a dependent. Okay, now let's figure out how we diagram compound sentences. We draw a baseline and a vertical line for our first independent clause, and we draw a baseline and a vertical line for our second independent clause, and we connect them with this dotted line on which we put our coordinating conjunction. It's really that simple. Of course, there may be other things connected to the independent clauses that we need to diagram, but this is the basic structure. Two baselines, two vertical lines, joined by a dotted line for our coordinating conjunction. Here's a very simple compound sentence. Joe sang and Jane danced. Here are our two verbs. Here are our two subjects. Here is our coordinating conjunction. We draw one baseline for the first independent clause, and we diagram it like so. Joe goes in the subject slot, sang goes in the verb slot. We draw a second baseline vertical line for our second independent clause. Jane goes in the subject, danced goes in the verb slot. Now we just have that one remaining word, the coordinating conjunction. We draw our dotted line, and we put the word on the dotted line. Let's turn to something a little more complex. These economists know their stuff, so you should believe them. Two independent clauses joined by the coordinating conjunction so. This is how we would diagram the sentence. Instead of going step by step, I'll simply explain it. The first independent clause is everything that leads up to that comma. These economists know their stuff. We diagram this just as we would a simple sentence. Economist is the subject, know is the verb, stuff is the direct object, and our two modifiers, these and there, go on diagonal slanty lines underneath their respective modified words. Which economists? These economists. Which stuff? Their stuff. So that first part is rather simple. Then we turn to the second independent clause and diagram that, just as we would a simple sentence. Should believe is our verb construction. That's made up of a verb, action verb, believe, and then the modal verb, should. We put them together on the same line as we would any case we have a modal verb together with an action verb or even a linking verb. Put them together in the verb space, and then we put the subject, the one who should believe, you, in the subject slot. The direct object here is them, and we have our second independent clause. These two are joined by the coordinating conjunction so we put so on the dotted line connecting the two baselines. To wrap it all up, that's what you'll have to do. Be able to diagram compound sentences like the ones I just showed you. Just remember, it's like diagramming a simple sentence, but we have two independent clauses instead of one, and these two are connected by a coordinating conjunction on a dotted vertical line.